Mark Mayrond actually explained the whole issue with Aboriginals and students and seniors in seniors' residences very well when he spoke before the committee a couple of weeks ago. And what he said was this, that it was well known by the Chief Electoral Officer for decades that there was an issue with youth away from home and seniors and Aboriginals. And so they did a pilot project in the last two elections to see if they could resolve that by the use of the voter card, the Where You Vote card, to provide corroboration of the address, so that you could use that plus another piece of ID that didn't show your address, but if you had something else like an Indian card that doesn't show your address plus a You Vote At card, that would be accepted. And that experiment, as Mark Mayrond said, was spectacularly successful. They only had 120,000 people that had to vouch last time. It used to be higher. The fact that 120,000 people had to be vouched for because they didn't have the correct ID demonstrates what large numbers we're talking about. So what the bill does to those 2 points is, first of all, instead of extending the use of the voter ID card to other groups, which was the plan of Mark Mayrond, it rolls that back. They can no longer be used for anybody, not even students, seniors, and Aboriginals. That's the first problem. And the second thing that it does is eliminates vouching. So the two ways that the Chief Electoral Officer was dealing with those who have difficulty meeting the ID requirements, namely the You Vote At card and the vouching, are both being eliminated. So it's rolling it backwards.
And to be fair, I mean, part of what we're trying to do, all of us collectively, I believe, is trying to get youth more engaged in the democratic process and voting and becoming more aware of what's happening around their country, within their country. And the reality is, this is giving them one more hurdle to get involved.
While we're talking about getting youth engaged, there's another important initiative of Mark Mayrond, which is called the Student Vote Campaign, which was aimed at encouraging more students to vote on campus. And one of the things that this bill does is it cancels the student vote campaign by preventing the Chief Electoral Officer from engaging in that sort of public information campaign. It says that all he should do is tell people where the advance polls are and when the advance polls are open, which is fine. But as far as the promoting student voting, no, that's gone. So there's a third way it's rolling the rights of students back.
On why we should vote.
I could just add, my son turns 18 years old today. He is one of 5 different friends in his crowd that will be old enough to vote in the next election. Not one of them drives. They have no ID to say where they live. We've taught our son from the time he could walk and come with us to the polling station that this was a privilege that he should be able to take part in, and he should be proud to do so. If something like this happens, we are going to lose an entire generation of youth who are just not going to bother.
The whole idea of not having cross-country roundtables, cross-country discussion from Canadians about something that's so fundamentally important to us, I think is clearly a step in the wrong direction. I have been getting emails and calls from people who have been asking Mr. Norlock to hold something locally so people can voice their concerns and their opposition and have him act on behalf of us. And so far he's refused to do that. So if there's one thing I think we're asking is for him to take the lead and come to us in our constituency and say, yes, I want to hear what you have to say.
And this is the problem across the country. You may recall that Craig Scott, the NDP Democratic Reform critic, was demanding that the parliamentary committee hold cross-country hearings, which of course the majority on the committee voted against doing. And therefore he's been doing his own, and he's been holding events all over Canada, he and other NDP MPs, to have public dialogue on this. The petition was signed by over 83,000 Canadians at last count, and that doesn't include a whole lot of signatures in this box. And the petition is to our members of Parliament to remove the parts of the new elections law that would suppress voting by young people, Aboriginal people, and low-income people, and seniors in long-term care homes, and replace those parts by giving election fraud investigators the power they need to compel testimony from political operatives, like the hear from the team of Cobourg Hall of Fame. The proposed so-called Fair Elections Act, which should be called the Unfair Elections Act, would make it harder for young people, Aboriginal and low-income people to vote. And we were talking about that earlier today. It has been for years a problem for students away from home, Aboriginals with no residential address, which is not on their Indian card, doesn't have an address, and all kinds of people who either don't have a driver's license or aren't living at the address that's on their driver's license. So in order to deal with this well-known problem, the Chief Electoral Officer 2 elections ago introduced a pilot project to allow the voter card, the U-Votat card that everybody gets, to be used as an address to corroborate your ID if your ID didn't have your address on it. This was spectacularly successful in helping students, Aboriginals and seniors no longer living at home to be able to vote. And so this new act does three things to students and others. First of all, it abolishes the use of the Election Canada card, which was supposed to be a pilot project that would be extended to other groups, and instead of extending it, it cancels that. Secondly, it disallows vouching, and even with the use of those cards, 120,000 people had to be vouched in order to vote in the last election, and so those 120,000 people would have been out the door. And thirdly, it would cancel the student vote campaign launched in the last couple of elections by the Chief Electoral Officer to try and encourage students to vote on campus, and that would also be cancelled. And of course, I really have to add my favorite thing that the Fair Elections Act doesn't do, and that is the fact that the winner-take-all voting system throws half of our votes in the trash, the ultimate voter suppression system, and of course it doesn't do a thing to make that make elections fairer on that fundamental issue.
And I think a couple of things we need to point out. One, I don't think this current government can really speak to integrity when it comes to elections, given their robocalls and their in-and-out scandal and all of those things. But I think more importantly is the red herring we keep hearing about, and the fact that in the last two elections, with 25 million people voting, there were only 18 formal complaints in 2008 and 2000 election combined. So the ulterior motive for this, as we all know and have come to understand, that this is really about hamstringing Elections Canada. Elections Canada has gone after the Conservatives for some of the things that they've done, and this is a way to control the electorate and Elections Canada. And two things I believe that as citizens and as people who clearly support our democratic right to vote, the fact that we will be having young people, Aboriginals and seniors, marginalized even more so from the voting process is something that we have to stand up and do exactly what we're doing here today and say no, clearly no. And if Mr. Norlock doesn't want to organize an event in this riding, then we should. And I think Wilf and I would probably be able to get together and make that happen. All right. Great.
Exact bike.